I call to order this meeting on the Bloomington Commission on Sustainability. This is our August regular meeting. Today's Tuesday, August 8th, 2023, and it's 6:02 p.m. Secretary, can you please call roll?
Matt Austin.
Present.
Caitlin. Matt Flaherty.
Here.
David.
Here.
Nigella.
Here.
Nolan.
Here.
Emma.
Here.
John. Jessica. Hannah, I'm here. Justin.
Here.
Alex. Heidi.
Here.
And Dennis.
Here.
Okay, today's agenda was distributed by email Friday, August 4th. I do have one addition to the agenda. Nate Ferreira is here to give a presentation on the Summit Hill Community Land Trust. So are there any objections to that addition? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is adopted. The minutes for the July 11th regular meeting were included in the packet. Are there any corrections? Okay, seeing none, the minutes are approved. We're going to go into public comment. You each have 3 minutes to speak. Whoever would like to go first.
Brooklyn, you want to introduce yourself?
Sorry, go ahead.
Quickly, EC activities, tomorrow night, the chair of our air quality working group will be addressing the council. And I think some of his observations again, of course, reflect sustainability. Second, we're trying to reactivate our water quality group that will focus primarily on surface water. A number of commissioners have significant experience in dealing with water quality issues. Particularly our longest serving member of the EC, his career with SPIA in this area goes back 50 years plus. So that covers things that are really, I think, nutshell of what's active with MC Iris. With the Environmental Commission. MC Iris is this year hopes to does have more resources than previous years to support planting of replacement vegetation, and we are very cognitive of the needs of the underserved members of our community in this area, so they will be getting, if we get participation from them, we will try to help them with priority. Also our work with parks and other departments, we're all currently engaged in things that involve continue to support sustainability and environmental purposes. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. My name is Brooklyn Hall. I specialize in media advertising and social media. David invited me to this meeting. We were just talking about how I could potentially help with the social media. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, David.
I think we discussed before here that in order to improve our outreach, we need to utilize social media, alert people to the projects that we have going on, and try to engage more of the community. I'm not a specialist at that. She is. She's gladly offered to assist and expand her own portfolio and helping us on our project. So if you guys have anything specific or just want more information, we could all discuss moving forward on social media outreach. And if we have enough, set up a regular schedule with her for engagement.
Brooklyn, can you please spell your name?
BROOKLYNN.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brooklyn. All right, we're gonna report from acting chair. That's me. I don't have a report. Report from staff liaison.
So, we're gonna need to make space at the desk here to be able to talk.
Scoot all the way down this way.
I didn't bring any printed versions. Just a second, we're gonna need to pull up all of the files that we're gonna go through. They're all through in the Ecos one. Or the sustainability grants. The three that I'll go over are already in the just Ecos folder. So if you just wanna pull those ones up, then that's what they'll all have access to. No, the other one, yeah. And then sustainable neighborhoods. Yeah, and then, yeah, if you wanna pull up the guidelines, that might be the easiest thing to start with, cause it's just that's basically like the website text, it's just the overview.
Okay, so Michaelan is here tonight to talk about our BCOS Neighborhood Grant Program and then also the BCOS Working Group Grant Program.
Okay. Should I just do a whole overview, just from the start? Sure. Okay. So basically there is $10,000 for small neighborhood grants that's gonna be made available through basically BCOS in partnership with our department. For grants up to $1,000 for neighborhoods. If you can scroll down to the qualifying groups. You can keep going. So these are the groups that will be eligible to apply. Basically, the way that the process is gonna go is that they will submit an initial application of the project that they're proposing, a project narrative, project details, deliverables, and then they will select what CAP goal it aligns with and provide a statement of relevance on how it aligns with that. That application will come through to city staff first. We'll just approve their general eligibility. And then we have got Emma set up in the grant software as a reviewer. So once we've approved eligibility, it'll come through to you guys. She'll have access to the full application, and then together as BCOS members, you'll be able to review it. I've created an evaluation sheet for you all to use with various different criteria based on the different elements of the application. You guys will go through that together as a group, leave any comments where necessary, and then Emma, as the designated person, because she's chairperson of the commission, she'll go back into the grant portal and then submit all of that electronically based on the reviews that you guys have given them, and you'll make a funding recommendation based on what they've requested and how you guys determine that to be applicable or necessary in terms of the amount of funding. That'll come back to us at city staff level. We'll review it, and then we'll send out the final funding decision. So in terms of projects, this is gonna basically be the website text. Also, somebody entered their waiver.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And then we scroll back up real quick. So we'll have this all posted on the city site once the program is launched. We wanted to propose or show this all to you guys before we get it launched in a press release and also up on the website. But we've listed the goals and strategies in the CAP that projects can be aligned with. We've basically pulled out ones that are feasible as like neighborhood type projects, and then listed a few non-exhaustive project ideas. So we've talked about neighborhood community gardens, planting native pollinator gardens, selling neighborhood organics collection for composting, etc. So give people a few ideas. Ideally, I think we're looking to launch this, open this up potentially next week, depending on how quickly we can get some documents reviewed from legal. The way that the funding is gonna work is gonna be as a reimbursement, so they're gonna have to show us proof of project completion as well as proof of purchases. Except for low income neighborhoods, they can sign a self-attestation form of being low income and request upfront funding in order to eliminate any hindrances to them being able to complete the project. So that's general overview. We're gonna work with Emma to make sure that she has full access as a reviewer, make sure that she's familiar enough with the process to be able to see that application come through. In the BCOS folder and shared with all of you guys is these guidelines, so you can look at that electronically, as well as the evaluation sheet that I drafted up, and then there's an SOP for the reviewing process for you all. So just a general review guide on what that whole process will look like.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Is this the first time that we've done this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
as far as I'm familiar.
Yeah.
Are there any restrictions on like who can apply for a grant?
Yeah, so it's going to be limited to, I think it's right above. Yep, registered neighborhood associations, multifamily unit associations, civic or community service associations. A neighborhood can also designate a nonprofit as like a project leader for them, but there's got to be a minimum of 4 neighborhood households that are like signed on to support, so that we can guarantee that it's actually for neighborhood benefit as opposed to individual households. And then there will be a neighborhood liaison that will kind of function as the person that's the point of contact for city staff or BCOS personnel. They'll submit the application, and they're also going to be the one that we're processing funding through. Did you have any other comments on the eligibility organizations?
I think it's outlined there really well.
No match required. Can't fund already completed projects, so it can't be like retroactive, like, hey, we did this, and ask for funding. And obviously has to occur within Bloomington city limits, the project does. Yeah.
Are they gonna be like distributed sort of kind of like one per neighborhood, or is it just like first come, first serve, like?
That'll be up to you to decide as a group. So I guess it depends on what type of applications you're receiving. If you're only receiving them from one neighborhood, then I'll let you decide. You guys can decide whether to fund them all or wait until we get additional applications.
What's outreach going to look like? Thoughts on that?
So we're going to have a press release. It'll be on our website. I asked that the BCOS members reach out to their neighborhoods wherever you guys live and let people know about it. We can set up a table at the farmers market, let people know about it that way. We can reach out to organizations that we're affiliated with to let people know.
Hand newsletter as well. That's a big one for our current sustainability programs in terms of residential outreach. We have a lot of people that rely on the hand newsletter in terms of neighborhoods and household benefits, so I think that's a good outlet as well.
Okay, so that's the neighborhood grant program. We can go through the working group program. If I can get this out of my way, I don't know how to do this. Out of my way. There we go. Okay. And then
Yeah, that one's not in there. Let me move it in there.
while she's pulling that up, I can just look at the grant evaluation sheet. So this is how members will be evaluating the applications that come in. So there'll be a scoring metric for each criteria.
Are these criteria shared for applications too, so people know what they're being ranked on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. That's a good idea.
Oops. Just put it in grants. Okay, I just put it in the grants folder in BCOS. It's copying right now. It's being really slow.
Okay.
There it goes.
Try refreshing, maybe.
Is it the BCOS grants folder?
No, it's just this grants one. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. This process, much more simple. So this is for BCOS members. We have separate pot of funding for you all. Similarly, this form will be in the shared drive, and when you guys have an idea, if and when, for a project that you'd like to fund, you're gonna fill out basically similar elements that the Sustainable Neighborhoods one will fund, so description of the project, outcomes, budget, timeline, and then a certain amount requested. There is also $10,000 for this pot of funding. So you guys will either work collaboratively or independently, fill this out, and then that'll just go to Sean, and then Sean will be making those funding decisions. Give a grant limit on that one.
And you all would be voting on it as a group as well.
Is there an amount limit?
I think it would just depend on what the project is, and you all would vote to determine whether it's applicable and if it's appropriate. So there's not a limit on it, but the funding pot is $10,000. But so if you want to host a workshop, a community workshop or something like that, funding's available for that. So just think of project ideas that you want funded. If you want to fund something that has something to do with the compost captains, you could write a proposal for that. So
Awesome.
yeah, so just think of projects that you think would be beneficial.
When are these going live, so to speak? I suppose the former will have a website page, but this doesn't need to. But are they both active now, or is there
We're still waiting for forms to come back from legal.
Okay, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. So Sustainable Neighborhoods, we have 2 forms
for
that
both.
they're,
Okay.
that they're reviewing right now. Once those are good to go, everything else in terms of a press release, website text, program guidelines, the application is all completed. Everything's set up to go live as soon as the forms make it through legal. This one, I don't know that there's much in terms of legal review needed. So that one might be.
This would be set up as an agreement with the vendor, and so they would have whatever vendor you choose, they would have to fill out some forms and be approved as a vendor before we would issue payment. So
What's the timeline on the funds being used?
until the end of the year. But we'll have additional funding. We're still going through the budget process right now, and there's the potential for funding to be available for next year as well.
So like $10,000 expires at the end of 2023.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the end of the calendar year?
Mm-hmm.
So like 4 months?
Mm-hmm.
We have to spend them, or we have to apply for them by then? Could we apply for something that's gonna be held in the spring?
If it's under contract and it's not issued by the end of the year, it could be encumbered. It's called encumbered, but if it's not under contract, then we would lose that funding.
But if you started the project in this calendar year, there's no
Right.
problem extending it through.
As long as your vendor is set up and the PO is issued.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how that works.
What if it's not a vendor-based, or maybe everything would be vendor-based, I don't know, purchasing supplies or something like what? In that case, does it?
For the working group?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to purchase supplies for a working group, it would be the same situation. We would set up a PO for, if you're gonna buy something from Office Depot, we would set up a PO, and then you would submit the invoices to me, and we would pay against those POs. So if the PO is in place, then it would be encumbered.
Okay.
So.
Great, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so that's for that. Go back to my agenda. Where's the agenda? So just a few more things I wanted to talk about. So we still have our Climate Ready Community Survey that's up until October. Just wanted to help spread the word about that and get more people to complete that survey. We have about 55 people so far. So if we could increase that number, that would be great. So it's a survey about our climate risk and vulnerabilities here in Bloomington. And last Wednesday, I was at City Council, and Earth Keepers gave a final presentation about their work here in Bloomington. It was a full 20 minutes, and it was very informative. I recommend people to watch that if you haven't already. And I provided the link to that CATS video.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just heard about that today, so.
Oh, good. Yes. Yeah, it was very informative. And, yep.
Question.
Sure.
If the report isn't posted elsewhere, it was in the city council's packet materials for last week. So for our meeting on Wednesday, August 2nd, the full report's there. Perhaps it's also on other places, but.
Yeah, thank you. And then just to let everybody know that tomorrow night, Michaelan and I and Gnarly Tree Sustainability Institute will be providing our greenhouse gas inventory summary report. So that's tomorrow night at 6:30. So, any questions?
Where is that in the city council?
It's at City Council.
Chambers.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Chambers. Okay,
Great,
thank you so much.
All right, we'll move on to Councilor Sofia Matt.
Yeah,
Thanks for joining us.
I sent an email around earlier today letting y'all know that after this I'm going to have to depart. Unfortunately, I have a conflicting meeting tonight, but happy to share a few updates from the council side. Let's see. We have a sanitation fees ordinance before the council that we're considering. We looked at this in June. We've looked at it periodically over the last several years, mainly in relation to concerns among some members about equity as it relates to how we fund sanitation services. So there's a wide variety of how folks fund sanitation. Sometimes it's purely revenues from fees. Sometimes folks use tax dollars for it. We do a combination, spend about $1 million from the general fund. The challenge is that that's sourced by everybody, taxes from everybody, but only people who get city sanitation services are getting that subsidy from the tax base. So I and others have been concerned about the social equity around that for some time and have looked at options to tackle it. My sense is there's not political support to tinker with that at this time, but we're still nevertheless looking at increasing cost environment and other things that we're trying to address. And so we have a second ordinance that's under consideration right now with another hearing for it tomorrow night, where we may have amendments and look at possibly a one-time fee increase to address rising costs and the ability to replace trucks on a more reasonable time cycle and some things like that. My hunch is we'll probably revisit this sometime in a new administration with a new council, but that's kind of where we are on that. Let's see. Been some ongoing conversation around Lower Cascades Park and the viability and policy options for a high comfort, safe walking and biking facility through there. It's part of about 20 years of policy planning for network connections on the north side of town. So there's been substantial investments already to the north of the main part of Cascades Park by the ball fields, also up to Clubhouse Drive and along Clubhouse Drive. There's kind of two segments that have yet to be finalized. One is from the intersection of Clubhouse and Kinzer all the way up to Acuff, which would also take it right by the high school and the athletic facilities there. And then also a section through Cascades Park that would connect, again, separated multi-use path all the way down to Miller Showers Park and connect into that network. There are challenges with having dedicated, separated facilities, which is really the standard for not just what our transportation plan calls for, but for all ages and abilities infrastructure. Comfortable enough for kids and folks to bike in, as well as pedestrians. So the challenges are that's a very tight space. If y'all have been down in Cascades Park, it's follows a creek bed. In fact, the Environmental Commission looked at this and was looking at some of the environmental quality challenges. I'm concerned about the amount of tree removal and bank stabilization that would have to be to leave the road as is now and have a separate, fully separated multi-use path. So we've been exploring several policy options. One is do nothing, which doesn't meet our policy goals, but we could, of course, ultimately look at alternatives that might have other options, a multi-use path on Kinzer Pike instead, for instance. The other three options, one is to build a separated multi-use path altogether from the road. Again, it's the highest expense and might have some real environmental quality concerns. A second is to convert the road through the park to a one-way road and widen it also a bit, create some separated infrastructure and have dedicated multi-use path for part of it. The third option would be to implement what was a pandemic pilot, which closed about a mile section of the road to vehicle traffic in order to convert it to a multi-use path. So in that last case, there would still be vehicle access to the park, just not through the park as there is now. That has generated a fair amount of pushback from, I would say, at least several dozen residents, maybe even more. On the north side, we also have some data on this from the pilot period. There was a survey for park users at that time. 170 folks took it, I think, and the majority were in favor of conversion to a multi-use path. But the council's kind of trying to figure out what to do about that. I've been talking to colleagues and talking to the planning department and constituents, and not sure quite where we're going to land. I'm interested in bringing a resolution of some kind to help give policy direction, request an appropriation or design. It might be that we ask for kind of the next stage of due diligence with respect to cost and environmental issues to construct a separated multi-use path. Because a lot of folks are pushing for that, even though it's the most expensive option, but again, the environmental quality issues and some of the feasibility elements are probably not known in enough detail yet. So that's where we are on that issue, which has been getting a fair amount of play, at least in our inboxes on the council. I don't know if that's made it to y'all. We also have a transit ordinance under consideration that will expand the boundaries to which transit can go outside of city limits. We've looked at this for some time and in fact already planned it at least for a high-speed east-west 3rd Street corridor that's being developed after we dedicated a 0.25% income tax increase to transit to help augment service. So that's been in the works. Also, there's some federal policy changes that I think are limiting where rural transit can serve. Basically, not able to serve in urbanized areas anymore in unincorporated county. So that might leave a real service gap for some folks, which is another policy reason to expand service. What remains to be determined is what exactly a cost-sharing kind of arrangement might look like with county government. City contributes around $5 million, maybe a little more, to Bloomington Transit's budget. They also get money from the feds and the state. But again, trying to do that in a way that's fair and for everyone involved. But that's also in development. It's something that's been talked about for a long time. So I wanted to let you know that that's moving. These all, of course, have significant nexus to sustainability in some way or another. Last one is that I'm working on a resolution that we'll hope to bring maybe next week around giving some policy direction for a study that's underway by the city to do a retiming of all of our traffic signals. We last did this maybe a decade ago, and in particular to look at two settings, leading pedestrian intervals and pedestrian recall, as defaults, if not everywhere, at least in high pedestrian areas downtown. So leading pedestrian interval is when the pedestrian signal changes about 2 seconds, 3 seconds ahead of the car signal. Statistically, it saves lives. People go out in a view shed before folks turn and run into people. So from a pedestrian safety and a pedestrian priority standpoint, context of transport equity, transportation sustainability, trying to give some policy direction there to make sure that that's actually prioritized in the study. And I think we only have one or two signals of the 90 plus in the city right now that actually have a leading pedestrian interval. So it just hasn't. This is known, this safety benefit, but it just because it's kind of triangulated between a few different departments and folks are at capacity, and we last had this study some time ago. It just hasn't really been implemented. So hoping that the council will approve giving policy direction on that study to increase safety and comfort and sustainability for pedestrians. I think that's all. I'm happy to answer questions on any of that or other questions folks have about what the council is looking at.
All right, thanks, Matt.
All right, thanks all.
We'll move into reports from commissioners. Just transition, do you want to do anything?
Yeah, I think Dennis is here, and she's planning to speak to our meeting with Duke Energy that we had, following up on your introduction. Thank you so much for that. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to speak to our meeting that we had with an organization called Safe Cities. And SAFE is an acronym. and they're based out of Portland, Oregon. And Safe Cities is an organization that helps network cities that are trying to stay safe from the harmful effects of climate change, particularly. And so they have a network of environmental organizers who are on similar commissions to ours in other places around the U.S. I think she said they even have 1 or 2 in Indiana, and certainly in other states that have very similar circumstances to our cities. So they're going to be connecting us with like regular, I think, monthly networking calls, like a newsletter to see what other cities are doing in regards to climate change. So we can kind of, that'll give the Just Transition Working Group sort of a, we can be the carrier of the liaison of best practices in that area for climate change to our community. So we're looking forward to continuing that relationship. And I think Dennis is going to speak to our meeting with Duke.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we had a great meeting with Duke Energy. Primarily, we talked to them about how can we support their mission and ensure that we're also supporting our mission of just energy efficient housing. And so their primary mission in Duke Energy, they said, was to achieve net zero methane emissions by 2030 and to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. They said that the best way that we could possibly work together is by helping to educate the public about the benefits of renewable energy and ensuring that they know that it is beneficial because it's something that's affordable and good for the environment. Something else that Duke Energy does is that they have a presentation where the presentation is pretty much a PowerPoint that they can do for the commission or they can do for the public whenever it's needed to talk to them about their mission, what they're trying to do and how they're going to do it, and also to talk to them about how renewable energy is beneficial. I think one of the concerns that they talked about was just like, how are we ensuring our just work transition, which is pretty much what has already been addressed. And that means, how can we ensure that as for individuals who are working in coal mines, that they're able to transition to a job afterwards. And so like they talked about how they're partnering up with other nonprofits to ensure that they're giving them skills so that they can work, so that they still have a job after they retire the coal mines is what they talked about. I think other things that were important to hear particularly were about some of the programs that they have. Some of you all may already be familiar with these programs. One of them is known as the LIHEAP program, which is meant to support low-income families to pay their energy bills. And the other one is the Weatherization Assistance Program, which is supposed to support just households can sign up for this program and they can make their house more energy efficient. It is important to note that there are certain eligibility criteria that they have to meet, that households have to meet in order to be part of this program. So right now we're in the initial talking phase. I think before the next commission meeting, we're planning on meeting together to see how we can work together with Duke to ensure our goals are aligned. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, is that all?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Quick comment. I don't trust a utility company that has helped get legislation to cut net metering in Indiana. So they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth.
I actually raised that in our meeting, and their response was that they think that there's still an incentive because people are still somehow saving money at some level. And I actually asked if they've actually seen or produced any data on whether that has dropped since they removed that, since they changed the rules, if that's actually changed behavior. And they said they haven't seen any studies yet or done any. So that might be something we could follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, I can guarantee that people are not installing the same size systems because if you overproduce any second during the day, you're selling it to them at commercial rates 4 or 3 cents, and then you're having to buy it back whenever you're not overproducing at
Right.
11, 12 cents. So
Yeah.
I'm sure this is the part of the company that does outreach and tries to greenwash the company, but I'm just never going to trust the utility because all they care about is money, from my perspective. So if we can use them, by all means, let's use the heck out of them, but let's keep in mind that they're just purely greenwashing their company.
Those are definitely valid concerns that we can be sure to, explore further in our outreach and collaboration with them. We also brought up overall profits and how those might be affected by a renewable transition. And they said that because of how they're regulated, they thought that they don't necessarily need to worry about profits dropping in a renewable transition.
They just want to own the renewable energy is what they want, so
Yeah.
they can still charge
True.
people, which is
Exactly.
why they
Yeah.
did their best to
Yeah.
kill net metering
Yeah.
from here on out, because they know that many
point.
fewer people are going to install on their house,
Mhm.
and the systems are going to be smaller.
Mhm.
So,
Well, we definitely appreciate, your insider expertise in this area, and maybe even the Just Transition group at some point should have like a separate meeting with you in particular to, make sure we are
yeah, you don't want me to be there when there's a
going
Duke Energy
into everything with our
representative.
eyes open.
I won't be very nice.
All right, thank you. Justin, do you have a report?
Nothing major. There's been a little bit of work done on the spreadsheet of various groups and individuals that we might want to reach out to at some point. So there's been a little bit of progress on that front. But other than that, nothing major over the last month. Really appreciate the offer for helping out with some of the social media stuff, because outreach to the general public is another big sort of thrust for this community outreach or strategic engagement and outreach group that we have. So we'll definitely talk more about that, and looking forward to working with you in the future. So that's it.
Great, thank you. From the Waste Management Working Group.
So I heard from Sustainable Joe that people have been asking the
Earthkeepers.
they've been asking the actual community orchard if they could start dropping off food there. So still hearing from plenty of community members, where can we put our food waste? I recently contacted a gentleman from New Jersey. It's called Community Food Cycle. I think it's communityfoodcycle.com. He does an industrial scale bokashi, which I've spoken about before. I'm trying to get him to do a presentation for the CAC, which is part of the Monroe County Solid Waste District, because they have $50,000 in their budget to address food waste. So I think it makes total sense that the county and the city should collaborate together. Basically, what the limited that he told me is there's a machine that's, I don't know how much it costs, but that's what you need to do industrial scale, with the idea that right now there's a $50,000 to $500,000 grant for, I think, federally, that has to be equal matching. So if the city and the county were to combine funds to get that piece of machinery, what's really cool is with the city looking at biodigester. I don't know if everybody's familiar with what that is. It essentially takes our poo and turns it into methane at the end of the cycle. The city needs, there's 3 scenarios with this biodigester. It's going to cost $50 million. The federal government's going to give us $15 to $25 million. Of that, the city would fund the rest if it gets approved. But the first is if we don't get enough HSOW, high-strength organic waste, if we just get from the water treatment plant, it would be about $1 million in a red per year. The second one would be essentially a break-even. We would need some industrial sites to give us HSOW. And the third, it would actually end up being profitable, so to speak, and they would be producing more methane, and it would cover the cost, so on and so forth. So what's cool about the industrial scale bokashi is at the end, I haven't verified this except from Matt from Community Food Cycle. He said that the end product could, currently in New Jersey, they send it to a biodigester as HSOW. So that would increase the amount of HSOW to make the biodigester more likely to break even or even be potentially profitable. So That's very interesting. And we have not done anything on the compost captains.
Okay, but we have a existing compost captains program that we might be very useful to apply for a grant, so we can use those funds before the year is over. Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Okay, Nate, we are ready for your presentation.
I will keep it quick. I see that you still have plenty of business. So, was there a way to bring that up, or?
Sean, I emailed you the PowerPoint.
Yes, I have it ready.
There's a lot of slides, but I'm gonna skip around a little
Is
bit.
Caitlin still here? Caitlin, do you want to give Nate a brief introduction
Oh yeah.
since you invited him? Or I can.
Is there a way? If you
Yeah.
want. Yeah, if you like.
Okay. Everyone, this is Nate Ferreira from Summit Hill Community Land Trust, and he's the director, executive director.
Director of Real Estate Development for the Housing Authority. I'll
Okay.
spell out all the different acronyms in a second.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And yeah, Caitlin and I met with Nate back in February, and he gave us some really awesome information on what the Land Trust is doing, and we, especially Caitlin, thought that the rest of the commission would really like to hear about it and see how because might be involved further. Take it away, Nate.
All right, thank you.
I'm so sorry if not heard. I'm
Okay.
in transit. My travel got delayed. Just Najla put it exactly perfect. Basically, I just thought it would be really important for us to listen to what Nate at Summit Hill has to say, because I think there's some ways that we can collaborate, especially the new working group that's helping with sort of project management and some of those marketing things. Maybe there's ways we can spread the word or co-collaborate more intersectionally. So
Great.
I'm so sorry. Again, my flight got delayed and I've been traveling all weekend. So I was expecting to be in person today. My apologies.
No worries. Thank you both. I traveled yesterday, got home last night late from a flight with an infant, so I can appreciate the challenges. So Summit Hill Community Land Trust is a program of Summit Hill Community Development Corporation, which is the nonprofit wing of the Bloomington Housing Authority. I know that's a lot. It's common for housing authorities to create a nonprofit so that they can expand their mission. Housing authorities can actually access other grant funds that they can't usually if they have a nonprofit wing. So that's my role, is kind of develop a role in that space. And our first really big project is the Community Land Trust. So the city administration, this has been something important to them for quite some time. So they've both, oh, I went too far. Yeah, oh well. Let me see if I can, oh, I can't click on my screen. Can I back up one?
Just toggle back.
I'm not sure how to do that without seeing. Anyway, so the city has contributed land. And there you go. Thank you. So Trinitas Development, northwest of 17th and Arlington, is the big student monstrosity. But they had an agreement with the city that they would set aside 45 single-family lots with infrastructure, and that's what's forming the foundation of the Community Land Trust. There was a proposal put out, and Clear Creek and Habitat for Humanity were selected as builders, primarily because they can build at a lower price point than pretty much anybody else. If you're not familiar with Clear Creek, they build modular, which meet the same building code as standard stick-built code, but part of it is built in a factory, so that's how they can afford to build inexpensively. Either way. The reason we need this, and I'm sure everybody here is probably familiar, is the sales price of houses at all residences rises much more quickly year to year than our incomes do. We looked back at the last 20 years, and on average in Bloomington, house sales prices went up 5% per year. And it would be generous to say our incomes go up 2% per year, and I would say that's actually an exaggeration. And so this creates a gap that the whole country is experiencing it. We see it here pretty blatantly. And so an intervention is needed that kind of disrupts this. And that's where our community land trust comes in. And so, yeah, you can jump forward. There's 300 plus community land trusts in the country right now. There's one forming in Indy right now, and there's one in South Bend also forming. They've been around the longest. But so we're part of kind of this movement of bringing community land trusts to cities that really need this model. It's not a new model. It actually developed alongside Habitat for Humanity in Georgia. It started as an agricultural project and then jumped to residential. And the basic idea is that homeowner is only buying the structure, not the land. The land becomes and remains permanently part of the trust. And that's the key component that brings down the price to make it affordable for more homeowners. I'll jump through this pretty quick, but essentially the ground lease, it creates something or contains something called a shared equity model, which over time, a portion of each time that house sells, a portion of appreciation stays with that house. So, and that appreciation, that portion becomes a discount for the next low-income home buyer. So today's home buyer might be able to afford a house with a fair amount of subsidy, not just the land, but we're actually going to bring additional cash to make it affordable to, say, somebody at 80% area median income. When they sell it in 10 years, they're going to walk away with some of their appreciation, plus everything they paid on their mortgage, plus 100% of any improvements they've made. But 75% of the appreciation is going to stay with that house and discount it for the next low-income home buyer. I have some handy graphs here coming up. You can skip several ahead to this little house. So that's basically what I explained. This is the basic model that makes a shared equity model work. The other thing this does is it removes land from the speculative market. So part of the issue in Bloomington and places like Bloomington is if developers can get a hold of land, they're going to maximize their profits. I mean, that's what they're there to do. Where we are actually removing land permanently from the speculative market, it becomes part of the trust, and it will be permanently affordable. And that's part of what's in the ground lease. As long as Summit Hill Community Development Corporation exists, these ground leases will exist. So jumping ahead, just to I think I've kind of explained these benefits. Something else unique about community land trusts is I said we were going to put additional subsidies. So you have the value of the land that discounts the sales price for the home buyer. But if we put, let's say, a HUD grant to discount it even further, that grant that we put in the initial purchase gets recycled each time. And I'll go over a little spreadsheet here next just to show you kind of what I mean. I'll try to keep this really quick. It's a little complicated, but so let's say we're at a point of resale. We've had a land trust home owner in this home, and they're ready to sell. The current appraisal when they're ready to sell is $250,000. When they bought the house, it appraised for $200,000, and therefore we have our $50,000 in appreciation. 25% of that goes with the seller, 75% stays with the house. This is, so below in that seller column there, you'll see their original appraisal price. And in this scenario, there was a land value plus additional cash subsidy equaling $75,000. So that first home buyer's purchase was $125,000 to get into that house. These aren't exactly Bloomington numbers. Those are a little low, but it gives you an idea of how much that house is discounted to actually make it affordable for somebody with a much lower income. And so you see their equity share available to the seller drops in there. So when that seller, the original seller, sells, they are walking away with $137,500. Now they still have a mortgage they have to pay off with that. So they're not getting all of that money. There's still a mortgage involved. If this was 10 years, they're probably walking around with closer to like $30,000. In the buyer column, so this is tomorrow's low to moderate income home buyer. So you've got the current appraisal of $250,000 on that house. It is automatically discounted by that recycled subsidy of $75,000. And then you have an additional $37,500 that brings the sales price for tomorrow's low to moderate income home buyer to $137,500. The land trust pays ourselves for the work of doing all of this. That's that resale fee. And so the new sales price for that home buyer is $141,500. So you can see this keeps a home affordable over time. It's going to grow somewhat each sale, but really the subsidy should grow more. And we don't know. I mean, obviously, if houses continue to rise like crazy in terms of their value, obviously it could create problems with this model, but it's better than what we have right now. There's one of the Clear Creek homes, just so you know. They're pretty, this is on 15th Street. They look like Habitat houses to me, very similar, but they're very efficient. They also, like Habitat, I think they build to the Energy Star standard. I don't think they build to the Solar Ready at this point. And so I'm trying to get through this quickly because I know you all have more. I do want to mention though, another benefit, and this isn't as much of an issue in Bloomington, but gentrification mitigation, meaning people are not driven out of their neighborhoods if they're on a land trust home. One of the things, and we've had initial conversations with the assessor, and they seem open to the idea that they'll only tax the homeowner on the structure, not on the land. And so if you are a homeowner and you've seen property taxes go up, it's often the land that is increasing in that property tax. That's where you see the big increase. So this has another stabilizing effect of keeping people's monthly payment more reasonable. So I'll kind of stop there. A couple things to note. Our consultant is Champlain Housing Trust. They're the largest land trust in the country. They worked with Grounded Solutions to conduct this study in 2019. So some stats, it seems to work especially well for minority homeowners, first-time home buyers. You can see the increase there. 7 out of 10 land trust home buyers go on afterwards to buy a market rate home. So we really see this as a stepping stone, though people could stay in this home for generations, that's fine. Let's see, average amount of money people take with them in subsidy, $14,000. Anyway, you can read the rest of those. I wanted to allow a little bit of time for questions, and just make sure I can answer those. I can always send more information too.
So you said the land lease is there as long as SHCDC is there.
Summit Hill,
So,
well, and actually even beyond that, I mean, it's the Housing Authority, because it's a subsidiary of the Housing Authority, it's really the Housing Authority that maintains control of this nonprofit.
okay.
And this Housing Authority has been here since 1961,
Okay.
So it's got some longevity. I don't think the Housing Authority is going anywhere. It fulfills a pretty...
Right, I was just wondering
Critical.
what
Yeah,
would be the
yeah.
conditions where that would
Right.
potentially happen?
I mean, it happens occasionally, but for instance, Bloomington did have a land trust in the early 2000s, which fell apart when the market crashed. And that's primarily, it wasn't the model that screwed it up, it was that the banks walked away, that they saw this as an unusual kind of mortgage. And I will just say, since then, in 2012, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have created a mortgage rider specifically for land trusts. So these are backed mortgage loans now, meaning they can be sold. So anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was gonna be about the financing.
Yeah.
Because I know, real estate financing has, obviously gotten really expensive in the last 12 months, especially, or 2 years since
Yeah.
COVID. And so, are there any mitigations for this?
Somewhat. I mean, there's
Or
only...
how do you help them find
Yeah.
the financing?
So we've been meeting with local lenders, and we have 4 or 5 lenders that are on board, and they're all lenders that do FHA loans. Now FHA loans is just below the 80% area median income, so that's a federal loan that allows for a lower credit score, and it's, I don't fully understand it, but it's provides some federal backing that makes banks comfortable with lending to somebody they might not otherwise lend to. So there are local banks interested. I have to say it's Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac creating that mortgage rider that really makes lenders comfortable, that they know they can sell this mortgage if they need to. Ideally, I mean, interest rates are these are impacted by interest rates too. So if interest rates do come down, that's the best case scenario. But we're not in that right now. But people still need homes, and we will still get them a lower monthly payment than anything on the market. So that's kind of the idea. We do have local support. I think that's the important point there. Other questions?
Leading into that, like, how are ways that like we in the community can support you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw today as kind of an introduction, and so I think keeping a conversation going. Can you jump all the way back to that plat, the third slide, I think. I mean, I certainly have ideas. This is an all-electric neighborhood. There's no gas in this neighborhood. And especially for low-income families, low to moderate income families, being able to buy heat pumps, some of the stuff that comes with all-electric is more expensive. And adding solar, obviously, we're going to be trying to do that as much as we can here. I think with the federal Solar for All grant that was posted a couple weeks ago, not the local Solar for All, and the fact that Indiana is one of the places that's applying for money, I could see us, you'll see that green common space. It's not green on here, but it is green. Number 50 there. I mean, there's a perfect scenario for a micro solar project for the whole neighborhood. I mean, that it's its own grid.
Microgrid.
Yeah, doing an actual, and I'm not saying I'm an expert in that, but I could see that's somewhere we could partner. And I think, the future community here might be really interested in something like that. This is, all of the houses are south facing, the roofs south and north, so they're pretty ideally situated for solar. They're not blocked. There's enough space between this and the student housing. So I'd say solar is the big place. Being all electric is a big step to have an all electric neighborhood. We're open to partnering. I think having a creative conversation about how we could use the land trust to support sustainability initiatives too is a great direction.
Is this already developed?
It is platted.
Okay.
We are literally within days of having Trinitas transfer the land, and we'll be breaking ground by hopefully next month.
What about a geothermal solution for those houses? Because it's a mix between property and the land.
Yeah, I mean, again, it would be finding the right grants. Infrastructure is in, so these roads and these alleys are in place. So I don't know how much of that would have needed to be done before infrastructure, but
I mean, it could be done behind them, but all down that line, and then they could all be shared.
Yeah.
So it'd be something very inexpensive to put in
yeah,
initially, but
that would be another amazing thing to explore.
I think there's some communities like that in Austin, Texas, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. It could also be Denver, but I remember seeing that. I think it was Austin, Texas.
There is stone, so that ups the price.
Oh, yeah.
There's limestone underneath much of this neighborhood. So.
Yeah, that probably makes it unrealistic.
I mean, it's something to explore.
Yeah.
The thing I didn't mention is this will be serving up to 120% area median income. So this is low to moderate income. That's the idea, which means a lot of us could apply for one of these houses and get in. And so I don't remember those numbers offhand. We are going to prioritize people under 100% area median income households, but just to let you all know, it's considered workforce housing too.
Does everybody know what a microgrid is? Yeah.
I know very little.
It basically, so they're on the grid and they would essentially have their own power with solar, but when the grid shuts down, solar has to shut down because you can't backfeed the grid if the utility company's gonna be working on it. So they would have to install batteries. And so by having the batteries, it would allow the neighborhood to stay up. It's not gonna be your AC, it's gonna be your most important loads. So that might be your fridge, freezers, and medical equipment. So it's going to be certain breakers that would still be on. But what that really means is you have, with climate change, you have a much safer neighborhood and resilient neighborhood, because the grid goes down, they're still up. So I think it's a fantastic idea. It would be great promotion for you guys. It would be great notoriety for the city as well, with the fact that it's a land trust and solar and microgrid. Like, that is fantastic, and hopefully that would be a model that other communities would then follow. I mean, that's fantastic.
So we should keep talking. Obviously, shared energy along the same lines as the shared equity, and it makes a lot of sense. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, and I know I asked this in our meeting a few months ago, but I wanted to, so everyone can hear the answer. So, what are your expansion plans? Because I know, as you've mentioned several times, this is for incomes between 80 and 120%.
No, it's below 120.
Oh, below 120.
Yeah, it's anybody under 120.
Oh, okay.
We just have to make the numbers work, which means
80% for the FHA. Not really.
So that's more on the lending side.
Okay.
So people do have to get their own lending. It's
Right.
just the
Right.
banks. Yeah.
So my question is, what are the plans to expand access to the most marginalized people in Bloomington, specifically the 80% or so of people who rent, rather than have the state, the income and life stability to be able to purchase a house?
Right. So land trusts are used for rental units. It's a little different model. I mean, it really is.
For instance, I know in some other cities that land trusts will buy an apartment building when it comes for sale and to keep it affordable.
Yeah. So I sit on the Affordable Housing Committee, the mayor's, and there's often developers coming through with ideas. In that sense, we're a developer partner, and I think if, and I don't know how things will change with the new administration, but I think we can be a partner to make projects like that happen. So I know there's like a couple developers that are looking at projects that we would like an affordable housing component to that, and the land trust can step in and monitor those units, basically be responsible for keeping them permanently affordable. So that's one place of expansion for rentals.
Are you talking new construction when you say a developer?
Nope. There's, it could be new construction, certainly. It could also be retrofitting something.
Isn't your organization the developer for this?
We are. Yeah, we're in the developer role for this, and we have builders that will be building out the houses.
But for like apartments, you would want
we would play
developer.
more of a managing the affordable units and keeping them permanently affordable. So right now, what happens when a developer develops a new building, they might make an agreement for tax credits or whatever, or with the city, and they'll keep those units, so many units, affordable for whatever area median income for maybe 15 years. Sometimes it's more. That's not the case with us. Ours would be permanently affordable. So when they're agreeing to work with us, they will become part of the land trust. But rentals are a little bit different because there's not land underneath, but basically it becomes a covenant. So there will be a covenant on that property that said this many lots forever, as long as this building's standing, need to remain, or this many units need to remain affordable. So we're totally open to that, but we've got our hands full at the moment.
Of course.
So that's one piece. I would say Habitat, combining Habitat with the land trust model allows us to serve even lower income households. So Habitat exclusively only serves under 80% right now, but we could be even on the lower end, opening up home ownership to below 40%. So it's which they do sometimes, but they lose money when they do that. And in our model, if we combined, it's more sustainable financially. So there's that, and then with Clear Creek, they can only. Part of it is just construction costs. You can only sell to somebody that can buy a house for as inexpensively as you can build the home. So Clear Creek can build it less than your market rate builder or your Lauren Woods or people that are doing luxury, but they can only go so far they can only bring down the price so much. So let's say they can bring down their price to 200,000, and then the land is worth 50,000. So that's our beginning sales point for a low-income family. And now we could add additional subsidy to bring it down even lower, but we're limited on how much cash subsidy we have. So we have to be strategic about that. And so, I mean, we're also just figuring this all out. But this is how other communities have done this, and so.
Thank you.
That was a lot.
What's your timeline for completion?
It'll be hopefully by the end of 2026. So we're looking at 12 a year-ish. And we will sell some of these lots market rate to generate subsidy for lower income. We're estimating selling 5 of them, which is will generate some income, because if you've tried to buy land in Bloomington, it is not easy and it's expensive. So.
Great, thank you, Nate.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate the time.
All right. We'll move on to the CAPS report. Nationally.
All right. Yeah, we also have a PowerPoint slide.
Their handout, yeah. Thanks,
Oh, actually, those are the speaker's notes.
Thank you.
I think I sent you the slides. Yeah. Oh, I think I mislabeled those. Yeah, it's the one that says notes, actually. Should be yeah, I reversed it. Perfect, thank you. All right. Thanks to my fellow BCAUS members for allowing the CAPS Commission to speak about such an important project here today. I'm joined by my fellow co-commissioner and co-author of the report, Kamala Brown Sparks. If I may offer a brief introduction of Cami to you all. While I have lived in Bloomington long enough to call it home, Cami was born and raised here. She's a true Bloomington local with historic roots in our city, including roots with our city's system of public safety and law enforcement. Kamala's father, Charles Brown, was the first black police officer in our city who retired as a captain after 22 years of service. Cami has a BS in education from St. Mary of the Woods and has been active for many years in community organizations, working to make Bloomington a safer and more sustainable community for everyone. Yeah, next slide, thanks.
Our commission was specifically created by the council with the view of exploring non-traditional, sometimes called alternative or community approaches to policing and public safety. Alternative public safety is in contrast to the traditional law enforcement-led systems of public safety, such as the one that exists in Bloomington, where the police department leads public safety and crisis response. While the goals of law enforcement sometimes coincide with the goals of safety, our report found that it is not always the case. For that reason, we recommend that Bloomington takes an alternative approach to public safety, one that is more cost-efficient, is proven in other cities to reduce crime as well as cost, and that greatly reduces the harm that is perpetuated by traditional policing-led approaches to public safety.
Our process generally followed the design-centered entrepreneurship process of social innovation created by Min Basador and Michael Goldsby, who was my professor at Ball State University, where I did my MBA. To enhance the evidential basis for our work, we added a root cause analysis to the process. This ensures our commission has a system-level understanding of the community problems that we were hoping to solve and could discern between root causes, causal mechanisms, and symptoms. In the fact-finding stage, we gathered all the existing relevant quantitative data, reports, and scholarly works on community safety and policing. We next used this data to identify key stakeholders and performed a 6-month community outreach campaign to gather diverse perspectives on these issues from the people in our community. Consent-driven means that this process is based on a method of governance and decision-making where all the people whose lives will be impacted by a decision are involved. But the opinions of the opinions of those whose lives will be impacted the most matter the most. Following the principle of harm reduction, using statistical evidence from public health, racial equity, crime and safety, and social justice, we found that the people most harmed by our existing public safety system are those who are most at risk of being victims of crime and violence by the system neglecting or marginalizing their safety needs, but also and especially those who are effectively deprived of access to emergency services through being at risk of harm by the existing public safety system by way of criminalization and incarceration. Being community-led means that while the commission facilitated the process, the community is really the author of the report. As you'll see in the 80 or so pages of key stakeholder testimonies, this community cares a lot about ensuring everyone has access to a life of safety. And what's more, we already have all the ideas and resources in our community that we need to do that. So our commission's job in following the first 5 steps of the process was simply to find all the pieces of this puzzle and put them together. Now that we have done that, we're sharing our work with the wider community to continue the next steps of the process.
After tracing each of the symptoms back to the systemic root causes, the Commission identified 3 key problem areas of systemic leverage points that can be resolved to create a more agile and responsive public safety system that can allow our community to adapt and respond accordingly to changing safety needs. The first problem is the persistent and growing barriers to access of important safety resources in our community. The second is the confusing, frequently conflicting goals of existing city departments who are currently tasked with improving public safety that prevent them from prioritizing human safety in all of their operations. For example, we found that the competing city goals of law or code enforcement and neighborhood and economic development at times undermine or even actively harm the goals of community safety. The third problem area we identified, and maybe the most important one, is a functional gap around the coordinating a strategic response to these growing public safety threats. In our outreach, we found that despite all stakeholders agreeing that a more coordinated response is needed to resolve these problems, no existing city departments view coordinating such a response as within their purview.
We then asked ourselves, how might we recommend a city program that can solve all of these systemic issues, that can allow our community to take a strategic response to these emerging threats to public safety? The main recommendation in our report is the creation of a new Department of Community Safety and Resilience, or a DCSR, that will prioritize upholding community safety above all other competing goals. In the immediate and short term, the primary role of the DCSR will be to create a non-coercive, highly trained peer responder team who can respond to the growing numbers of service calls to 911 for low-level, non-violent calls for help that do not require an armed law enforcement officer response, such as drug overdose, mental health crises, or elderly and infant care. This right care, right person model of crisis response is aimed at improving justice outcomes, yet it has also been demonstrated in other U.S. cities to reduce overall costs and crime. Besides this critical short-term role, however, the DCSR also has a fundamental long-term role. As the world around our city changes and the threats to our community safety evolve over time, the DCSR will maintain public data dashboards that track, anticipate, and show how it is responding to these threats. Once emerging service needs are identified, the DCSR will work to remove all barriers to access through activities such as forming partnerships with service providers, developing the capacity of those providers in the services most needed in our community, and securing sustainable funds for them from federal, state, or other sources. Unlike any existing city departments, the DCSR will have the explicit responsibility to coordinate a strategic response to reduce the most serious threats to our community's safety and resilience.
The recommendation for a DCSR is contingent on the results of a feasibility study to be carried out by an independent firm to assess the economic, organizational, and legal implications of such a department. Cities such as Denver, Colorado, and Eugene, Oregon, who have taken community safety-led approaches, have seen cost reductions in public safety, emergency, and ambulance spending that more than cover the cost of operating these programs. Furthermore, they have experienced reductions in overall crime and violent crime, so we expect the feasibility study to find that a DCSR will actually save rather than cost the city money. Organizationally, the DCSR will enable the city to combine several of the most important safety-related services into one department, whose main objective is human safety, while working to identify and resolve competing goals that exist in other departments that directly impact safety. A feasibility study can help our commission decide what current city services might be better carried out by a DCSR and how to best structure that department to collaborate with other city departments and other key community stakeholders. Legally, we expect there may exist some federal laws and state statutes or codes that may have effects on our recommendations that we are aware of when creating a DCSR, so the study will allow us to identify any of those that may exist. Finally, it was uncovered in our outreach that the city has not had an independent public audit for several years, and that without this first step, any serious economic analysis would be speculation at best.
So how does this all relate to BCAUS and sustainability? The first and most basic sustainability indicator of the United Nations SDGs, as you all know, is no poverty. From the UN website, this means to, quote, end poverty in all its forms everywhere, end quote. What does eliminating poverty mean? It tends to refer to absolute poverty or creating a floor of access to basic resources that everyone in society can access as needed. We found in our research that one indicator most strongly correlated with producing higher levels of crime, violence, mental illness, drug use, homelessness, and environmental pollution is economic inequality, as demonstrated very well in this book and The Spirit Level, which was the book that came before this one, written by an economist and an epidemiologist. So when our city cannot provide access to housing for the 300 residents who are reported to be homeless, even though the reported housing vacancies report around 10 times that number of empty, safe, and move-in ready living units, this is unsustainable. When people living with mental illness and or drug addiction cannot receive access to evidence-based mental health care and drug treatment, regardless of their income level, because of the lack of local service providers, this is unsustainable. When the police department cannot find or retain enough staff to fill positions because of the low workplace morale from officers who are sent to respond to calls that they are not licensed or trained to deal with, this is unsustainable. When the city has increased the police budget by 50% in 4 years, yet the crime rate has not gone down and many problems have only gotten worse, this is unsustainable.
When many of the residents of our city do not have access to safe housing, mental health care, and drug treatment, how can we expect them to prioritize caring for the environment? Because of the necessity of human beings to have access to shade from trees, water for hygiene, cooking, and other purposes, coupled with our city's denial of safe housing, hygiene, and basic sanitation services to unhoused residents, the non-traditional living areas of unhoused residents in Bloomington are frequently located near or in sensitive environmental habitats for other living beings. The unhoused residents living near Clear Creek off Switchyard Park have no choice but to harm the wildlife, plants, water quality, and other environmental resources of Bloomington simply to survive. No one in our city should be forced to choose between their own survival and causing environmental damage to the wildlife and plants who live near creek beds and natural resources that we all depend on to have a good quality of life.
So how can BCAUS be involved? So far, the commission has already We've already received endorsements for the letter to Mayor Hamilton. That's included in the handout that you all have a copy of. And so far, we've received some pretty influential individual endorsements, including from Charlotte Zietlow, as well as high-ranking representatives of the Indiana Recovery Alliance, the Community Kitchen, Middleway House, Monroe County CASA, and Help Ourselves Mutual Aid Group. Because is the very first city commission or board that the CAPS Commission has approached for an endorsement of our recommendations. And we hope and expect to get broad community support from other commissions after this as we continue our outreach with boards and commissions. Cammie and I are here to invite BCAUS to be the first commission to support and collaborate on this with us in the next steps, which include creating a feasibility study, finding a qualified firm, and ensuring a future DCSR will keep Bloomington safe, resilient, and sustainable for many generations to come. Thanks for letting us speak today. Are there any questions?
Have you seen any models for integrating this anywhere else, where after the department is formed, how you go from what we do now to what I'm saying is there a phase-based transition? So while people call 911 for everything now, and police officers show up, is there a plan, like at first there's somebody from the DCSR that goes with the officers, and then as they gain seniority, they find out which situations are more appropriate for their services. Maybe you go down to one police officer with multiple DCSR agents or representatives. Is there an actual
like another city model that has
Well,
made
yeah,
this transition
Didn't they
before?
mention Denver and another city that's already done that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Denver.
but do they have a plan for how that
Transition
developed?
happened.
Yeah. Actually, in the report, the actual wording of the recommendation includes for the feasibility study to recommend exactly such a incremental, that's what you're talking about, an incremental
So the
development plan.
feasibility study, the
Yeah, the
outcome of that would
feasibility
be-
study would also ask this independent firm to recommend an incremental development plan that then, of course, the community and the CAPS Commission and the rest of the community, can improve, hopefully. But yeah, that is actually included in the feasibility study as it's worded
I
in
can
the
see this being
report.
very successful
And it's to
in iterations, but not as a.
What?
This could be very successful in iterations, but not as an overnight. Right.
And to your other question of other communities where this has been done, do you want to speak to that?
We studied Ithaca and Denver, Ithaca, New York, and Denver, and Oregon. We studied different programs that have implemented this type of system. And like in Denver, they originally had people that went out with the police, but over time, they made it so that there's a separate group that goes out now, and the police will be called in later if they're needed, or won't be called if they're not needed at all. And here, we're hoping to do something like that and have people be able to call in, and when they call, have it be determined who will be sent out. And the way it is right now, the police department automatically decides who goes to a call, and we feel that that needs to be changed.
And one officer with 3 DCSR representatives is a lot cheaper than 5 or
It's a
6
lot
officers,
cheaper.
right? So.
Yeah, and the other best practice case that we studied that's very relevant here is Durham, North Carolina, which is the home of Duke University, another college town. They have a Department of Community Safety. I think it's almost identical, and they actually have 4 teams. And one of them is a team of mental health clinicians who are embedded in the emergency dispatch, so that you would literally have someone on scene who's a licensed mental health expert deciding who should go, what team should be sent, and they're also able to de-escalate the situation before the crisis responders arrive. So crisis response would be a big part of this improvement, but The reason why our main recommendation is for a DCSR instead of just this crisis response team or something to be handled by an existing department is that we found the most important thing, learned from other cities who've done this, is that it needs to have oversight and authority in the city, structural authority and community oversight in a way that ensures it can resolve those conflicting goals that come up between safety and other things, right? There's lots of goals that the city has to do. It has to do economic development and it needs to do law enforcement, right? But there are situations where those goals conflict, and having a department that is basically parallel to the police and fire, but who prioritizes safety rather than law enforcement or other possibly conflicting goals is what's important, and as well as having the oversight, making sure it's going to have the community oversight to to make sure that it's looking out for the community and that the community has control.
But how is this funded?
It's funded, so, I mean, again, part of the feasibility study is to lay out the details of that, but in other cities, they have found that the savings from the public safety spending, so I've mentioned the police budget's gone up 50% in 4 years, so there's cost savings to be considered, right? But yeah, it's funded the way any other city departments are funded, right? But the idea is this is a more efficient model, and you would literally be bringing almost all of this is existing. I mean, there's a few of it that's new, but a lot of it's already existing. The fire department has a mobile health unit, and everyone knows the police have their embedded social workers. Like, a lot of this is already existing, and we simply want to streamline it, organize it better under one department whose sole focus is safety, and that's their main priority, to make sure that people who are currently deprived of emergency services because they are afraid to call 911 because of possible harm to them through these other problems, that will provide them with access to emergency services. Just giving people access to emergency services saves money. So there's so many ways that this saves money as well as reducing harm. So
do we want to make a motion to
So
support this?
the motion we're asking, that's the motion we'd be asking for, would be for the commission to endorse the letter.
Yeah. So we'll have
Okay.
a second
That
reading.
supports, yeah.
Okay.
So maybe next meeting we can
Okay.
have a motion and vote on it, but you presented it now, so we can have everyone
Sounds
review
good.
it. Yeah.
Where do we find the full report?
Oh, it's linked in several emails that have been sent out. It's like over 100 pages, so we didn't attach it to anything.
Sure, yeah, fair.
But it's also on our commission's website.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a button on the bottom left.
Mm-hmm.
And it's linked to several. I'll email it out again tonight to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Mhm.
Were there other recommendations as well besides just the key recommendation?
Yeah, actually, that's number one, and then number two is specifically about key performance indicators. And actually, I was going to speak to this, but because we're running short on time, but actually the key performance indicators that we recommend, I think, are also ones that could be utilized by BCAUSE in its mission of our commission is to identify and track sustainability indicators, and I think a lot of the indicators involved in key recommendation 2 could also be ones of sustainability for the reasons that we laid out, that poverty, justice, and environmental harm are intricately correlated, and so these indicators really inform each other in lots of ways that don't need to be reduced to one or the other. It doesn't need to be public health or safety. It doesn't need to be the environment. A lot of these times they correlate. So, and then the third one is all advice to our own commission to follow up the work and keep it going.
That's really great work. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll review the letter next meeting, and we'll put it up for a vote if we want
Sounds
to
good.
endorse. Cool.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Okay, so last thing on new business, I wanted to bring up the environmental community networking mixer. Nolan, I don't know if you have any more information than I do.
Just the same email. I don't know if you're familiar with Stephanie Richards, but she, the Raleigh Tree Institute was who helped the city put together the sustainability action plan, and they're very active in the city. So yeah, I guess they're working with the O'Neill School for this mixer, and they're looking, and I guess Najla went last year.
Alicia and I attended last year, represent Because.
So yeah, they were wanting to know by yesterday if somebody from our commission wanted to be there next week on Tuesday. It would be a commitment from around 3 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. At the O'Neill School. I'm not going to be able to be there, so it's kind of a big ask all of a sudden.
So next Tuesday, 3 to 5?
Yep. So the actual event starts at 4, and they said they'd like people to start showing up around 3 to start setting up. You would have a table, and you could bring any. I don't know if we have any BCOS flyers or handouts at this point, but. But yeah, the idea was to recruit enthusiastic volunteers to assist with their upcoming initiatives.
Okay. Last but not least, I make a motion to recommend to the city council that we remove John Eldon. Per bylaws, he's missed 3 meetings. And so we cannot remove him, the city council has to, but we need to make a recommendation. And then they will follow up with him and see if there have been extenuating circumstances as to why he hasn't been able to. But he's missed 3 in a row and he's missed multiple prior to that. So I make the motion. Do I have a second?
He's been out of town, he's been out of the country, but.
He could still come online.
Yeah.
So I make a motion that we recommend to the city council that he be removed. Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you.
Do we have quorum? First of all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay.
Do we need to?
Voice.
Is this something we can bring up and vote on in the same meeting?
I have no idea. Actually.
Recommendation?
Yeah.
For the recommendation, I think you just need a motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
But,
Yeah,
Okay,
because we're not
everybody-
voting on him being out. I just got the motion in the second, so that's up to the city council.
but if
Per-
everybody
per
has
the
an
bylaws.
opposing view.
Any
please.
objections?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would abstain if we were taking a voice vote, just.
Fair enough.
Okay. I don't really know how this process works.
We don't
so-
really have a process.
Right, so, okay. If there's no objections, then we'll make a recommendation so we can fill it with someone that
We'll show
More
up.
available.
might be more participating. Okay. Any other new business anyone wants to bring up? All right, I think our meeting's been long enough. I'll adjourn.
Upstairs pub.
Our next meeting is September 12th, 2023 at 6 p.m. here. Hope to see you all then.